My name is Marcus Landry. I've been farming crawfish here in Louisiana for nearly 40 years. Same ponds, same bayou water, same sunrise over the cypress trees every morning. Most folks think international business is something that happens in big cities, in tall glass buildings, run by executives in suits. But let me tell you something. International business can start in a muddy crawfish pond just like this one. For most of my life, I thought my business was simple. Raise crawfish, harvest them, sell them around Louisiana. But one day I learned something that economists call imperfect markets theory. Now that sounds complicated, but really, it explains something very simple. Sometimes the world's markets don't connect very well. And when that happens, businesses like mine start crossing borders. For years, most of my crawfish stayed right here in Louisiana. We sold to seafood markets, local grocery stores, and of course, crawfish boils. If you've ever been to a Louisiana crawfish boil, you know how it works. Big pots, lots of seasoning, family and friends standing around a long table covered in newspapers. It's not just food, it's culture, and business was steady. Every week we'd harvest the ponds, load the crates, and deliver crawfish to local buyers. But there was one problem. Louisiana loves crawfish. But Louisiana is only one market, and that market can only buy so much. One evening I was sitting at my kitchen table looking over invoices. I had my laptop open, checking seafood prices around the country. And that's when I noticed something strange. Crawfish in some other places were selling for 2, sometimes 3 times the price we got here in Louisiana. 3 times. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized something important. People in other places wanted crawfish. They just didn't have easy access to them. That was the moment I started understanding something economists call market imperfections. Markets are supposed to connect buyers and sellers, but sometimes they don't. Here's the thing. Crawfish grow naturally in Louisiana. Our wetlands, our climate, our water, they're perfect for it. But most places around the world don't have that environment. So people in those places depend on imports. But importing crawfish isn't simple. You need transportation, cold storage, distribution networks, international buyers who know where to find you. And sometimes those connections just don't exist. That's what economists mean by imperfect markets. Information doesn't travel perfectly. Transportation isn't always easy. Supply chains don't always connect smoothly. So even though buyers exist and sellers exist, they never meet. A few months later, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was a seafood distributor. He said he worked with restaurants overseas, places where crawfish were considered a specialty. He told me something I'll never forget. "Marcus," he said, "people in other countries want Louisiana crawfish. They just don't know where to get them." Right there, the whole situation became clear. The problem wasn't demand. The problem was connection. The market wasn't perfectly connected. And that's exactly what imperfect markets theory is about. Before long, we started shipping crawfish beyond Louisiana, first to other states, then eventually to buyers overseas. The operation looked very different from my early days on the pond. Processing facilities, packaging plants, refrigerated trucks, and finally, shipping containers leaving the port of New Orleans. That's when I realized something powerful. My little crawfish farm wasn't just part of the local economy anymore. It had become part of the global economy, all because the market needed someone to bridge the gap. Now let me explain the economic lesson behind all this. If markets were perfect, information would move instantly. Transportation would be effortless. Buyers and sellers would always find each other. But in reality, markets are rarely perfect. There are barriers, transportation costs, regulations, lack of information, differences in infrastructure. Because of these imperfections, companies sometimes expand internationally to create those missing connections. In other words, firms go international because markets are imperfect. Businesses step in to solve those imperfections. And when they do, international trade grows. You know, when I first started farming crawfish, I never imagined my work would connect to global economics. I was just trying to make a living. But that's the funny thing about international business. Sometimes it starts in places you wouldn't expect. A shrimp dock, a crawfish pond, a small family business. Imperfect markets theory isn't just an idea in a textbook. It's what happens when real people find ways to connect markets that were never properly connected before. So the next time you study international business, remember this. Sometimes the global economy begins in the quietest places, like a crawfish pond in Louisiana.